once I had my own sons who are grown now, from the time they were teenagers onward, I was like, please, it doesn't matter what your human rights are. It doesn't matter what your civil charter rights and freedoms are. Please, if you ever get stopped by a police officer, whatever you do, don't say anything. Don't cause any problems, because I can't get you back if they've already shot you.
Don't matter if you're 12 years old, 32, 52, 72. You've seen the videos. How do y'all feel right now?
Indigenous leaders say 1 year after Canadians took to the streets demanding justice in the wake of George Floyd's death, their relationship with Canada's federal police service remains as strained as ever. I'm standing here on unceded Algonquin territory in Ottawa, land Indigenous people never agreed to give up. And just a few hundred meters behind me is RCMP headquarters, a physical manifestation of the inherent contradiction at the heart of the relationship between Indigenous people and the RCMP. It's a relationship that's been characterized by violence, oppression, and distrust that one historian says is baked into the very DNA of our federal police force.
It was designed to go west to basically take control of the lands there and to help move Indigenous peoples onto reserves.
Steve Hewitt has written 3 books on the RCMP's history and says when Sir John A. Macdonald created the Northwest Mounted Police, he had a clear blueprint in mind: the Royal Irish Constabulary, established to enforce British policy in Ireland. Policy that consisted of evicting Irish people from their land.
They were the primary enforcers of Canada's Indian policy, which we know now from the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls was actually a genocidal policy.
Pam Palmater is an attorney and Mi'kmaq woman from Eel River Bar First Nation. She says in 2021, the RCMP has won few friends among Indigenous people.
Who's the first to show up when we're peacefully defending our land rights or water rights? It's probably going to be the RCMP, and they're not going to look like the RCMP riding around in their red coats on horses. They're going to look like the military, heavily armed vehicles, snipers, camouflage, fatigues, you name it.
A recent report into how RCMP handled Colton Boushie's killing concluded Mounties racially discriminated against Boushie's mother, and an early RCMP media release suggested Boushie's death was justified. Last year, Chief Alan Adam was sucker punched and put into a chokehold by a Mountie who suspected Adam was driving impaired. Mounties in Nova Scotia were accused of refusing to intervene when a mob attacked an Indigenous fishery. All this made it even stranger when last year RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki said some officers had unconscious biases but couldn't say if the organization was systemically racist. Lucki later corrected herself and apologized in front of the Assembly of First Nations.
Throughout our history, whether it's been fulfilling our mandate to enforce federal, provincial, territorial, municipal laws and policies, or through systemically racist institutional decisions, the RCMP has taken actions that have obviously eroded First Nations people's trust. And some of these actions have left generational scars.
This year's federal budget has cash for Mounties to address systemic racism, $75 million over 5 years and $13.5 million ongoing. And the RCMP says it'll revise its entrance exam to bring in more diverse applicants. Commissioner Lucki says the RCMP is also modernizing its de-escalation training and making anti-racism training mandatory.
We have a new Indigenous Lived Experience Advisory Group, which is now providing us with advice on how to advance reconciliation and address systemic racism issues. We're partnering with Indigenous women's groups, initiating an equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy, and we are now in the midst of formalizing a brand new office for RCMP Indigenous collaboration, co-development, and accountability.
Palmater says she isn't counting on the RCMP to change itself. Instead, she's looking to last summer's massive outpouring of protests against racial injustice.
Us coming together, you see Indigenous peoples working with Black Lives Matter, and then you see, Stop Asian Hate working with Black Lives Matter and Indigenous peoples. And the more we come together, I think that's exceptionally powerful. And it's a kind of power that they don't have a control on.
In Ottawa, Xiaoli Li, City News.